had somebody once say, we were talking about, I think, women pastors. And I said, like, yeah, I just don't know if I can be in places where they wouldn't support women as pastors. Yeah. And they said something like, yeah, I just don't do a lot of picking and choosing in the Bible. I mean, besides, I swear and I have tattoos and I drink every once in a while. And I was like...
Okay. All right.
So what are we talking about?
Hey, it's Chelsea.
And it's Brandon.
What's up, dropouts? You have made it to episode 20.
20.
I can't believe it. It feels crazy.
After this, we promise to stop freaking out about episode numbers.
Yeah, but this is a mile marker really for us. Like, and I think I say it more so because I never know what we're actually on. So totally. It helps. You know, I've even made graphics for episodes that were not the right episode numbers and put them out, and our listeners have corrected me that it was not the right episode.
I haven't even caught that. That's hilarious.
I've definitely had, yeah. So I don't know what's going on.
Oh my gosh. Well, we have a story we've been promising to tell you guys for at least a couple episodes.
You guys, I'm deceased. So I want to read it from the perspective. This is from, and she said, you know, you can totally use my name, but her name's Eden, and she sent me the story from her perspective. So Eden, I really appreciate this text messages. You know, I love you. She's a big fan of the podcast, shares it with her friends. Like, I love that she listens. And,
so you're going to read Eden's perspective, and then
yes.
I'm going to give you the what had happened was?
Yes. Well, but you're going to get this one first, you know what I'm saying? So this is really funny. If you are a pastor or, you know, because somehow we still have pastors that listen to this podcast. I don't know how, but they're still here. And so for you guys, if you've ever had like a ministry fail, or even if you're like a teacher or in any kind of leadership, like you're going to be able to track with something like this happening. So just enjoy. So, oh my God, I've been saying we need to do a podcast about this police chase. That's how it starts out. So I just needed you guys to hear the first line. All right. Okay. So once upon a time, our plane left for NYC at 6 a.m. and we needed to be at the airport at 4 to meet at the church at 2:30. Timing all line up?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
I think.
Brandon was not going, which that's the last comment he gets to make about the story until it's over because we are only getting this perspective, but I needed to know that. All right, Brandon was not going to NYC because he had just started his position at the church a couple weeks prior. So we didn't have time to make arrangements to go. NYC is the National Youth Conference. Is that what it's called? National Youth Convention or something? And I went this year actually too, and I remember texting Brandon this day, and it was so funny. But so it's a big Nazarene conference. Tons and tons of people go. Our whole district, tons of churches go. So Brandon starts working at this church, and this is a student at that church sending me this story. So Brandon couldn't make arrangements to go yet, but he had to meet us at the church still because he had to give us our money for the trip, gifts, keys to the church van, everything else that we needed for the trip. After all the chaperones and kids arrived for the trip, Brandon was not yet seen. We gave him quite a few calls and text messages, but no responses. At 3:15, we got a call from him saying that he slept through his alarms. Important side note of the story is that he lived about 45 minutes from the church at the time. Thank you, Eden. That's a very important side note.
Thank you.
Brandon rushed out the door to get us. Love her perspective. Knowing Brandon would most likely not get there in time to drive to the airport, go through security, and make it on the plane by the time he got there, we tried to make other arrangements, but at 3:30, no one else was awake. So at 3:40, Brandon pulls into the church parking lot with 2 to 3 cop cars behind him. The girls and I are screaming, thinking he got a police escort, but that was not the case. The chaperones told us to shut our phones off and stand still. Brandon pulled in with the police, demanding him to turn off his car, get out, walk backwards, all the things. It was literally so scary to a bunch of high schoolers who maybe just got their permit or license. A cop came over to talk to the group of 17 high schoolers and 2 adults. The police asked what we were doing and who was in charge. The chaperone told the cop that the person in charge was the person they had in handcuffs. She explained what was happening and why we were there and why Brandon was probably speeding. I was ushered by a cop to come and get the going away gifts and keys out of Brandon's car. I got to speak to him for a quick second, and he was still so positive. Even when he knew he was straight up dumb. The cop came back and told us about stopping when we're being
I didn't know they got a lesson. That's hilarious.
The cop came back over and told us about being pulled over and how to stop, and gave us a good life lesson that no one will ever forget. We made it to the airport very late, but we did make it on our plane at 5:50. Brandon gave us many life lessons, but that lesson scarred us for life. Sorry for leaking the story, Brandon. Your followers need to know. And my favorite part, I hope we can somehow put this in, but she included this clip, which I don't know how we'll get it to you, but I'm still just going to play it because the sound. If you're driving in your car and you're not watching YouTube anyway, you have to hear the beginning of this clip.
No! There's no way! He got a police escort. That's so freaking funny.
Oh my gosh.
Oh my god. Holy shit. So what do you have to say for yourself, honestly?
God, honestly, Eden, I thought, did a great job of telling that story. I was a little bit nervous, but
oh my god.
her times were on point. She gave me a good defense of I live 45 minutes away.
Holy shit.
You know, when you start a job 2 weeks in, you don't exactly like to call your boss and say like 10 odd kids couldn't make it to their their national trip.
Oh god.
They almost missed their 6 a.m. flight, but it was amazing that how everything worked out. But.
It does also remind you sometimes of the almost for me, not to cast blame on anyone else, but I'm like, what in the world?
Devil?
Yeah, for sure. But what in the world head pastor would just hire a youth pastor and know that they have nothing to do with the trip and they can't go or anything, but then deem them still responsible to meet at the church at 3:30? It just feels like some leadership gaps as well. I don't really.
I would say even I was learning. If I was smart, and I wanted to greet them off. When you're 2 weeks into shepherding these people, I wanted to show them how much I love them, cared for them, praying for this week. Hope it's a great thing. I had a breakfast spread already ready. Yeah. And but I had all the keys to the building, and their cash was in envelopes in the safe inside the building. So I had to unlock the youth center and
Man, that is just. So why did the cops not take you? How did it end? Because I don't really think I don't know if.
Yeah. So I guess what I'll say.
You went to jail.
No, I did. I was speeding the whole way, 45 minutes, and then I got off the expressway and I saw a cop turn around when I was less than a mile away from the church, and I was just I think I was just so dumb. But maybe you just see enough movies and you're I
can do this.
I could do this.
Yeah, definitely.
So I kept going, thinking he's following me. He wants me to pull over.
Yeah.
His lights are on.
Yeah.
And I'm just I'm just gonna get to the church. It's less than a mile. I could.
Yeah.
And honestly, this might be a little bit of I think when you are a white man like me... I was just going to
say whiteness, yeah.
I think when you're a white man like me, you think you're... even when I'm walking outside late at night with Jackie, and she's like, hey, I'm going to pump gas. This happened once. We were dating, and she was like, hey, I'm going to pump gas. Can you follow me? Because we were in separate cars, and she was like... Yeah. And stay around me, because I've been, hit on before and different things like that. Yeah. People creep me out at the gas pump at night. Yeah. And I was like,
You've never had that experience.
In a minute later... I get out of my car, forgot that she had asked and why she had asked, and I went to the bathroom. I just was so I think sometimes in your whiteness and in your when you're a man too, you just think
your lived experience is so different that when you get in that situation, it wouldn't be
that I think I can string along a cop.
Yep.
In my head. And maybe I was just tired, whatever. Yeah. It is early, I'm in the shock, I'm trying to handle this of my group.
Oh, God, you guys.
I was if I could just get to the church, I know that I'll be hey, officer, I just need to get these keys to my leader and take the... they'll unlock this money. We can handle whatever we need to handle. You need to take me... give me whatever ticket. Yeah. And that's how I thought it would work out. I didn't think I'd have to be put on the ground in handcuffs in the back of the cop car, all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
There were 2 cop cars by the time I pulled in the church. Don't know where the second one came from.
Oh my God. He called him in, man. He's like, this little boy.
So he ended up talking to me. They let me go, and they said, like, hey, we have to, we heard all the story or whatever. What were you doing? You're dumb, right? Like, this. And I was like, yeah. But, like.
Yeah.
And I just said, like, yeah, I know it was super dumb. Like, definitely won't do that again. Like, I understand why that evading the police is a big deal. And so they wrote me a ticket, thankfully, for careless driving. Because evading the police is, like, twice the points. Yeah. Twice the consequence. Like, evading the police is enough to chop your license. Yeah, wow. So imagine starting your job, you live an hour away. Like, I would have probably had to resign from my position.
Have got a life lesson like Eden. You know what I mean? So, next time a cop car is doing a little, gonna maybe pull you over, you just pull over. You just pull over. No, I
gave them all that lesson.
Yeah, absolutely.
But you know what's so funny? Is I called them, on their way to the airport after I met with the cop, and they were like, Brandon, are you okay? They started to care for me, and they were all, and it's actually funny that this moment kind of bonded me with those 10 students in a way that, like,
no one else could really get. Yeah.
I wanted to bond with them. I just wanted to do it through, like, greeting them before their big trip and with
maybe
breakfast.
Not going to jail almost or something.
Yeah, something like that.
We just pick and choose different things, you know what I mean? It just depends. Yeah, I've gotten out of probably 3 or 4 tickets, and I can remember, like, vividly where I was when I got out of them, like the parking lot I pulled into or the street in Dundee. I can remember, like, literally I can see the situations by saying that I was a pastor.
Wow.
So I've been in.
Maybe that's what happened. Maybe I would have got evading the police if it wasn't for I'm a young pastor.
I think it's interesting. Yeah. But I can't believe that.
It's also a very white town, so I mean, what do they have to?
That's true.
Yeah.
Yep. So anyway, crazy. We just love that story. I really wanted you guys to hear that, and Eden's been asking me to share that story, and I'm like, well, girl, I got to get the inside scoop first. I can't just share that with no insider perspective. So. Speaking of episode 20, Brandon and I were kind of talking and looking back as we were getting ready for this episode, and so I kind of just wanted to ask the question. I know that it's something that we've already kind of talked about a little bit, but what is your favorite part about, like, where we're at now? We're 20 episodes in. Like, what do you love about the podcast? Favorite part, things like that.
Yeah, favorite part is anybody that has a side gig or a side project would just say, like, the pursuit of it. Yeah. It's sometimes, like, joy enough. Yeah. So I would say, even if we did this and there are, like, 2 people listening, like...
Totally agree.
Figuring out the technology, I mean, you guys have been with us through some...
You figuring out?
Yeah. Okay. Like, even, like, developing the business license, the bank account, like...
Yeah, so fun.
That's been fun for me to put my head towards that.
Yeah.
But it would... That alone is cool, but, like... What's really cool is we have people that will message us and will say, I listen to every episode. Yeah. Or even better, they say, like, this is really meaningful. Yeah. Like, I think you guys, like,
I'm pulling up a message
are doing work that needs to happen. Yeah. Like, I have a pastor friend that said, do you guys realize, like, you guys have a church? And I'm just like, I mean, that. Yeah. And he himself actually has a church, and I'm not saying we don't do church with you guys, but, like, it's interesting that he would feel that when so many pastors would be like, all they do is rip on the church.
Yeah. But, like, people that are, I think, really in tune with God and, like, are in tune with, like, what God would want for his people, understand the desire for community. And so that's why a good pastor might look at what we're doing and say, like, it's community, right? Like, I don't want to be a church, but this is community, you know? It's kind of cool. I just wanted to say, for you to say that, I got a message, and it was a DM that a girl got from a friend, and it was that she said, you should check out Religious Dropouts. And her friend's like, oh, I love them. So she sent that to me and was like,
that's cool.
Yeah, and she was like, y'all are known. That's crazy to me. And I was like, girl, we ain't known, but it's because famous angels like you follow us. You know, we're just like, man, love you. Thanks for sharing that. And then she goes, every time I tell someone about the podcast, they already have at least knowledge of it. I just want the best for y'all, a true inspiration to everyone. And then she, you know, goes on a little bit. But I just thought, like, piggybacking off of what you said, I just thought that message, we just got that, like, last week. And it was just cool, like, that sometimes the people that follow this community, actually, I would argue maybe all the time, the people that follow this community are broken. And when they share that brokenness, like, of our podcast or an episode that affected them or whatever, and somebody is able to DM them back and say, like, oh, like, I love them, like, I love that podcast, it's really helpful. It's like, that's a whole nother community being built, you know, among them and, like, what, like, their brokenness together, you know.
Or even the people that are frustrated with the church and before they might not have had a podcast. To be like, we're pissed with you. Yeah. And like, the DMs we'll get where it's like, y'all had me in tears.
Yeah. Yep. Well,
there's a certain level of frustration that does bring you to tears. Yeah. So, like, when people see you in that, like... Absolutely. So, hopefully we continue to see people in that.
Yeah. I think, too, I really, like... I think sometimes what we've talked about on this podcast has given some of the people that I know in my life boldness to, like, talk about what they're going through. That's good. And I know people in my life that have left ministry or have... like, in the beginning of the podcast, in the first, like, 10 episodes, maybe, I had people that would message me that had left ministry or that had gotten the courage to step away or take a break or whatever from what we were creating here. Mm-hmm. Like, literally from the conversations that we were having, it inspired and gave them the boldness to walk away from something that was not only no longer serving them, but actually, like, treating them like shit. And that's been really inspiring to me. Like, man, if I can encourage 20 more pastors to walk away from a dangerous environment, and that's not every church. We have pastors that listen to this. Actually, I think a couple of worship pastors donated like $200 to our conference for us to be able to go, and that paid for, I think, over half of our flight, I think, or at least half. Yeah. So I'm not saying that about all pastors, but there are a lot of ministers and a lot of people sitting in churches that need to get the hell out, and I hope that we can continue to speak about that and, like, give them some kind of courage to take that step.
And I was thinking when you were saying all of that, with the polarizing seasons like 2020, and how people started to deconstruct like me, and they started to say, like, why this, why that, why does the church not do this when people are dying, like,
or where is the church?
Where is the church in this? Why it's so important is because I didn't have the eyes to see everything or the ears to hear everything and to know actually what's happening. And I had to borrow words from people like you, people like Rachel Held Evans, and several other people that would voice how they felt about
the brokenness
in our world. And because I got to borrow their words, I knew how to speak. And it's taken me up until now where it's like, oh, I think I'm speaking on these things the way that my heart breaks for them. And what really blesses me is who knows the next polarizing season. Although it tends to be election years here in the United States of America. So if that's anything true, the young people that will listen to our podcast,
definitely,
and maybe have the words to combat, combat what they see happening in the church and in their families.
I totally agree with that, and I think there's nothing more, like, there's nothing I love more about the podcast than everything that you just kind of said, like all the, like that brief conversation about, like, boldness and community, and I think it's a huge blessing to have you guys here. And it's a huge blessing to have you guys sharing the podcast and talking about the podcast and bringing more people into this community to kind of know that, like, their brokenness and their hurt from the church is not isolated and they're not alone. And I really appreciate you guys, like, allowing us to be in that space with you. So
So I don't necessarily think we'll celebrate like an episode 30.
Yeah.
Even though this is like, well, 2 multiples of 10. So obviously
so maybe
20
3
is
multiples of 10. We'll really celebrate.
Maybe we won't on 30. Maybe we won't
50?
on 40. Maybe on 50.
Yeah.
Because that's like a whole year. 52 is a
50
year.
is a meetup and a celebration.
Oh, yeah.
So, you know what I mean? We've
Hopefully
been talking about that
we have a meetup
forever.
before that. But what's been interesting is our dreams have to take a lot more.
Yeah.
For what this podcast, it takes a lot more energy than I ever thought it would be.
Definitely.
Yeah. So it's like, oh, we really wanted to have merch by now. Like, oh, we really wanted to have
we are
a website
we
by
are
now.
having merch. Like, we are doing it no matter what.
No,
in like a couple
that's
weeks.
For sure. Yeah.
Actually, I think that was our October. By the beginning of October, not the 1st. Okay, so calm down because I know this is coming out.
Who promised y'all that?
No, in our business meeting.
The devil.
I will find our business meeting.
Did we have
notes.
that go? Okay.
I swear.
Well, we'll have to work it then.
But it's so funny. So, Brandon has a big mad energy.
What y'all mad about now? Y'all really pressed over that shit? Wow. Big mad. Y'all got big mad energy. Y'all just want an excuse.
I'm going to pull up the story.
That'd be great.
Just because the caption.
Yeah.
But I wanted you to kind of give us the lead off of that because it came from a local place.
This local Grand Rapids area bookstore called Betties Pages is moving their store locations. And they had this sign out in front of their store for like all of the years they've been at this place that says Black Lives Matter.
Yeah.
And it's been beat up because that's what outdoor signs get.
Yeah.
The owner said that they never experienced vandalism until they finally moved all their stuff over to the next one.
Yeah.
And they put this sign by the dumpster because it's been so beat up. Mm-hmm. And this owner goes to the new store, comes back the next morning to get a few things, clean up or whatever, and notices by the dumpster somebody had crossed off the word black and wrote all on this like chalkboard sidewalk sign, and spray paint. They did all over black, so they said all lives matter instead of Black Lives Matter.
That makes sense. Yeah.
And she was kind of dumbfounded, the owner, and kind of wrote about it. And I was like, oh, I'm a little dumbfounded too. that somebody would see something by the trash and be like,
yeah,
and not just be like, well, they're right to put that by the trash.
Right, exactly.
They're like, no, let's make it say what we need it to say. It's not like it's a fancy, nice sign that's hanging in the window already.
Well, it just goes to say, like, it reminds you that, like, hate runs so deep.
Yep.
And it reminds you that, like, to get your agenda across, to be, like, to want to say what you need to say and make people believe in your agenda, you will go to no. Like, there's no length you won't go to.
Yeah.
So, it's just really sad.
And she said it's both sad that this is still people's response and disappointing, even if it's not surprising.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with that more. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I wanted to read this quote to you guys that we shared on our Instagram this past weekend, actually. It was on our story. But we wanted to kind of talk about it a little bit because I thought it was not only like perfect and fitting for episode 20 as we've navigated tons of different types of topics with you guys and like different issues. But this quote was, when Christianity is working... Why does Face ID not work? All right, cool. When Christianity is working, what we care about is our neighbor. When Christianity is not working, what we care about is Christianity. And I want you to sit with that for a second, and I'm going to read it just one more time, because I think, like, teacher style real quick. When Christianity is working, and you can sub Christianity with the church too. I think it's the same exact thing. When the church is working, when Christianity is working, for this quote at least, what we care about is our neighbor. When Christianity, or the church, is not working, what we care about is Christianity, or our church. First thoughts.
I have had several people say things like, you seem mad about the church. You're mad at the church, or mad about God. Mm-hmm. And, like, in response to me sharing anything like, the church should, or like, we should mourn with, or we should take care of the poor, or different things like that. Whenever I feel like I'm sharing a post about our like social responsibility, I'll have somebody swipe up and be like, Brandon, your post hurts the church. so you shouldn't talk about it.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
And this feels a lot like that. Is their concern is protecting the building or protecting the establishment.
Yeah.
And my thing is, you can let that establishment get beaten and bruised all you want.
Yeah.
It will still survive, but we need people that will look out for the other people that aren't being looked out for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm gonna share some thoughts too, but I want to first give our attention on this same quote because it was on social media. Of course, we love keyboard warriors.
Keyboard warriors for Christ.
Okay, so on this post, I loved it, and the first thing I think about when I see things like this is like, wow, that's a beautiful quote, that's a beautiful word, what Brandon just shared, like, then I think, but I know some people were assholes on that. So, like, let me click it. So, these keyboard warriors were kind of my favorite this week. So somebody says, are there any real world examples of this actually working?
God.
and then this one, so out of context. What? And then this one, and then I'm going to have Brandon read this last one. This person makes no sense. They've rejected true Christianity and are promoting a false gospel.
God.
And then, oh, that was the last one. My bad. I was going to have you read that, but I screenshotted on both pages. Anyways, but so those are our keyboard warriors for the week on what would have been a beautiful quote on the internet turned into, we're promoting a false image of the gospel.
In what context?
I know.
It's just a post.
I know. But I think what gets me is what I often find when I'm loving my neighbor in any capacity, for some reason I feel like the people who get the most pissed that I'm like loving people the way that I know Jesus told me to love people, they often throw back this weird weapon of the Bible. Like they'll throw back like that exact last one, like you're promoting a false gospel. And you're just like, but where? Like,
you're
you know what I
being
mean?
worldly.
Like,
They're standing on biblical authority, biblical principles.
Yeah. And honestly, what's so like conflicting for me in my spirit with those types of conversations is like we see exactly what's happening now with what happened then. Like, for example, the Bible talks a lot about like religious leaders who were taking, the Bible as law and authority in ways that were hurting people, and Jesus is like, nah, like that's not how it is. Yep. Like you're promoting religion above people, and like that's not what God's about. So that was corrected, like that was changed, and now we live in a culture where like it's kind of the same thing where we talk about women getting health care or women and reproductive rights, and all these Christians who are like, yeah, make sure abortion's illegal. But then you're like, well, wait a second. But like that, it's another example of all these Christians and these religious leaders taking this authority that God never intended for them to have. Like, but wait, your law or is actually hurting people. Yep. It's not protecting women. It's not helping whatever babies you think are being protected. Like, it's not doing what you think it's doing. It's not the gospel. Yep. But for some reason, like that's you know what I mean? I don't know. It's just weird that it always comes back to like we have a false God. Yeah. Then. We're promoting a false God if it comes to loving our neighbor. And I just don't.
It's the cherry picking. It's like when it works for them.
Yep.
When they want it.
Yep.
I had somebody tell me once, in kind of what I look back as like kind of laughable, but I had somebody once say, we were talking about I think women pastors, and I said like, yeah, I just don't know if I can be in places where they wouldn't support women as pastors. Yeah. And they said something like, yeah, I just don't do a lot of like picking and choosing in the Bible. I mean, besides I swear and I have tattoos and I drink every once in a while. And I was like,
okay. All right.
So what are we talking about?
Right.
Yeah. So you get to appetizer sampler, but I don't get to? Like...
Exactly, yeah. You get to pick what you want, but I got to stick to this? All right, cool.
Right.
No women, and gay people suck. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't get it.
Or they can get tattoos because they looked at the context around the tattoos, which I support.
Absolutely, yeah.
But they're willing to do that for that, but then they're not like, oh, well, the context around this was they lived in a patriarchal society.
Right.
And
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. No, it's the same thing. Yeah.
So
no,
wild.
Totally get it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I know. I think it's interesting because I think it's interesting the fact that idea is so true. The fact that like if you are a church that's living out the way a church should be, you are always thinking about your neighbor. I remember one of my favorite pastors, and his name was Pastor Dave Bowser, and I loved him. He was a huge supporter of my ministry. He was very helpful to me in the very beginning of my ministry as a young pastor. I think he's still a pastor now. I think he was at one point maybe up for a district superintendent nomination. Yeah, or maybe is. I don't. But anyway, he was a great guy and is still a great guy, I'm sure. But one of the things that he did at the church that he was at is when you leave the parking lot of that church, there's a sign and it says you are now entering the mission field. And if you know anything about church, the mission field is the people that God asks you to serve and love and like care about. That's your mission field. Like you need to go out and be like God in the mission field. And his belief of that and the reason for that sign was because when you leave the parking lot of this church, that's actually where it's at. It's not in these four walls. This isn't where we're worshiping and we're in here together creating community, but the mission field, the community, it's out there. And he spearheaded a lot of projects and a lot of support of the community. And anyone that's listening to this that knows him would say that. But I just thought such a beautiful representation of what the church should be. What was that kind of idea?
Yeah.
So I don't know.
I'd love for more pastors to get out of their buildings and to like leave their fortresses, because that's kind of what it feels like. Is like you get to barrage people with the power that you only have within those four walls.
Yeah.
But then you so you have an opinion on everything when you're in those four walls, but then like you're not involved in your community. So I do want to see pastors, regardless of if I agree with their political or even their theology stances, I want to see them in positions on boards and in their community. Yeah. Because honestly, I don't even know if like you do have some shit perspectives, if they'll like stand up out there, and they need to
see
be
that,
challenged.
Experience that. Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
What about this makes me think of a recent story you told me about, where there's a pastor.
Oh, I hate it already. Please, full send.
There's a pastor on a community mental health board.
Oh my God, bro.
And why it connects to this quote is,
dude,
you are there alongside your pastor.
Don't get me started. No.
Who tries to come alongside their neighbor.
Yeah. But he doesn't like the presentation. That's what it was. Yeah. You know, this meeting, they were on Zoom, and they were meeting in person, but she was just on the Zoom. Well, the organization, our local community mental health in Monroe, is complete garbage. And this was a board meeting, and they left their Zoom open. Like, they didn't
anybody could come?
Like anybody, and talk on it.
Oh, okay.
So not only did they leave the Zoom open for everybody to, like, watch the meeting if you were online watching, they left it unmute.
Not my problem. So, you don't have a moderator.
Exactly. Well, that's what my boss said. My boss, who is also a pastor, was like, well, for full send then. Like, I'm going to interrupt this meeting to advocate for, the third funeral this month of someone who has committed suicide or lost their life because of the lack of services from this $53 million organization. So anyways, long story short, that's what she did. And he got very nasty and very aggressive back to her and saying basically that she was not godly and that like her response and the way she was interrupting and yelling and whatever was not of God, although she was advocating for the least of these in people. Now, let me say, since then he has sent an email of apology. So, okay, sure. However, the point still stands though, is that this is a white, older male that was yelling at her, and this is a younger black woman. Completely different context of ministry, couldn't be further different. And you didn't like how she was aggressive about protecting and advocating for the lives. And I'll say the same thing. It happened to me at a board meeting not that long ago, where an older white male, different guy, was rolling his eyes as one of my black homeless shelter members was sharing his story. The older white male was rolling his eyes, the board member. And then when I got to speak at the next board meeting, I addressed him. And I was like, now, as much as you'd like to roll your eyes, I'd like you to listen, because you have no idea what these people are going through. And so it's like, it's the audacity for me when you're standing up for the broken and you're advocating for the least of these. You would expect the church, like that minister, to understand more than anybody, but instead, it's not the case. They don't like it when things get messy. They don't like it when things get loud. And that's half the reason they spend time in their four walls of the church. Yeah. They're protected there.
They're comfortable 53 million.
That's right.
Do they operate off of like less than 10 and then give you guys like the rest of it for like...
Dude, they're so terrible. They don't. They do. Our local community mental health is so bad. The sad part is the more I share about mental health in our community, I get messages from a lot of people that struggle in their community too. So it's really sad. It's a hard thing to find help. But I will say, I don't want to share too much as I know we're getting ready to kind of sign off this episode for you guys. But I will say, Brandon and I are putting a lot of time and energy into our own mental health and into how we can provide mental health support for you guys. And we're actually talking with someone right now that we may have some things we get to bring you about mental health that may really help you and some people that listen to the podcast. So we're really
kind of
excited.
Looking into like what format that would look like.
Yeah.
And
but I'm really excited
amazing.
about it. Yeah. And so he just kind of got a little bit of a green light, and we've got to have more conversations. But man, it's exciting to think about that. And when we were talking about mental health just now, it made me think of that. So maybe cool. For the next season, we'll be able to launch something for you. So.
Well, maybe just in a quick wrap up, what do you want to see? Maybe not in the next 20 episodes, but in the next like season of our podcast. What's something you'd like to continue to see or see that's totally fresh and new?
I would love to see less content. Like, I would love for it to be harder for us to write episodes. Yeah. Like, the church continues to just off and on be so shitty in so many things that they do that it just feeds. And sometimes I'd like to come on and be like, let's talk about this incredible church that did, the church that another podcast just brought up. They partnered with their Arabic neighbors, I think, or Muslim neighbors, and they celebrate with them. And even though they're completely different religions, they have potlucks together. And like, I'd love to talk more about stuff like that. Like, I would love for some of our content, like, to be able to highlight what's good sometimes. And it feels like so often right now, there's so much darkness surrounding church and church leadership, and I'd love to have something shift there. But wishful thinking. What about
you? That is wishful thinking, especially going into 2024.
I know.
I'd love to see some other voices, like guests on our podcast.
I would love that.
That'd be super cool. That's something we've been like wondering about for a little bit.
A quick plug. Anyways.
Gosh, I mean, some business stuff like our website.
Yeah, website.
Because if we had a website, we could catalog kind of all of the like links and books and
definitely.
Music. We haven't even got to share with you guys some of the music we listen to.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
And that kind of stuff is fun for me because as much as this is a podcast, it's a community that we've always seen it as community first. Definitely, so like resourcing and sharing what we love is like top priority. So
agree. Yeah. Well, we love you guys so much. We hope that as you leave this podcast today, that your day is just incredible and that you remember how much God really does love you. And if you don't believe in God, I hope you remember how much we love you. And we're super happy that you're here. So we love you, Dropouts.
Love you all. Bye.
Hey fam, thanks for listening to this week's episode of the Religious Dropouts podcast. We hope it gave you a space to breathe, to laugh, and connect. It's our hope that as you journey along with us, that you too might find yourself saying, damn, it feels good to be a dropout. Be sure to check out our show notes for links to anything mentioned in this episode, including ways to connect with us on social media. We'd also love for you to like, subscribe, and share this podcast with anyone you know who might want to join our community. You are loved. Have a great week.